Hi, I'm Bolf. I'm a woodcarver and a musician. I live in central Maine in the town of Greenville, which is located on the shore of Moosehead Lake, which is the largest lake located in one state on the East Coast. Moosehead Lake is 40 miles long, 11 miles wide, surrounded by mountains, and as the name implies, we have a lot of moose. The main reason that I decided to produce this film is that I am also a positive thinker. Now, this isn't meant to be an instruction video on positive thinking, but I do want to be clear about what I mean. I am not saying that I am an optimist. Optimists tend to expect the best possible outcome. Positive thinkers realize that bad things can happen. One thing that defines a positive thinker is that he is a person who understands that for every problem there is a solution, and many times there are several. The search for creative solutions can make life interesting, challenging, and exciting. Now, if you've ever experienced failure, you may not believe what I've just said, but I've found that failure itself can lead to some pretty interesting and exciting solutions that may never have been discovered any other way. In the mid-60s, music was my passion. I studied it in college and played tenor sax in a rock and roll band. Eventually that band broke up and I was unable to find another one. One day I woke up to realize that I'd been working in a steel mill for the past 5 years. My dream of a life in music was vanishing. Desperate to turn things around, and in the reckless foolishness of youth, my mid-20s, I quit my job. I packed up my motorcycle and with my wife went looking for something better. I found a club in Florida that would hire folk singers after an audition. So I bought a guitar, wrote a bunch of songs, and went in to audition. Halfway through the second song, they asked me to please stop. It was the most humiliating failure that I've ever experienced. At this time, my wife and I were staying in a campground on St. Augustine Beach. A woodcarver had a shop in the campground and carved souvenirs for the tourists and totem poles for the campground. My wife suggested that we consider woodcarving as a possible career. She'd seen me bomb out as a singer. Here's my first woodcarving. It's a tiki, a Polynesian figure, if you can't recognize it. There was a large one in front of the campground. It took me 3 days to make and created a lot of blisters. But I fell in love with wood carving, and for a lot of years it replaced music as my big dream. Now, I had grown up with books like Robinson Crusoe and Swiss Family Robinson. I loved Gilligan's Island. Adventures in Paradise back in the early 60s was my favorite. I realized that I had a chance to become a beachcomber, and I took it. We camped out for almost 2 years and learned wood carving. It was a wonderful time, one of the best experiences I've ever had, and it was the direct result of my most humiliating failure. So you see, failure can create its own unique opportunities, but you have to look for them, and you have to be open to change. After a couple of years of living on the beach, learning how to carve, we felt compelled to move to Maine. Although living on the beach was great fun, and I'd always wanted to be a beachcomber, we were longing for cool air, mountains, lakes, and trees. We picked Moosehead Country because of its beauty and remoteness. We arrived in town with $60 in our pocket. The next day our car broke down and cost us $90 to fix it. The garage wouldn't give it back to us until we could come up with the money. So under these conditions, and still living in a tent, we began to look for a building that we could live in and work in. We visited real estate brokers as if we had plenty of money. We were so young and so foolish and so naive. But within 2 weeks, we located a building in the downtown area. We arranged a lease purchase, moved in, and we were in business. No money, no inventory, just lots of enthusiasm. That first summer, we made a trip to Canada. We found the town of Woodcarvers. There was a museum there that had a life-size statue of a woman. She was sitting down on a rock, wearing a sundress and a straw hat. All the weaving in that straw hat was carved. She had bare feet and beautiful hands. That wood carving changed my life. I very badly wanted to be able to carve like that. But in spite of my desire to do that kind of work, fear of failure and fear of ridicule stopped me cold. Fear became a way of life for me. And for 15 years I told myself that I wasn't good enough. I convinced myself that if I did try to do work like that it would turn out poorly. I filled my time with easy projects that required little skill. And eventually I became very bored with wood carving. The fun had gone out of it. I was making a decent living, but I didn't take pride in my work, and there was no enjoyment in it anymore. So, after 14 years, I sold my business in Maine and decided to go looking for something else. After bouncing around a bit, I found myself back in St. Augustine, Florida again. Because I'd spent so much of my life in music and woodcarving, I discovered that I had no real job skills. I wasn't interested in sales, or management, or minimum wage. So I went back to the only thing that I really knew, woodcarving. I opened a shop in downtown St. Augustine, and I was back in business again. One day a man came into the shop who was in his late 70s. He looked around a while and then came up to me. I thought he was going to tell me how good I was, as so many people have. Instead he said, "It looks to me like you've just given up. You're too good to settle for this." It turned out that he taught sculpture at the Jacksonville Art Museum, and he lived just down the street from my shop. He invited me into his home and introduced me to real art in wood, in clay, and in bronze. He visited me often and lent me books on sculpture. I spent a year in this shop and I learned what I could from this fella. Unfortunately, my wood carvings didn't sell well in this area. Floridians weren't buying moose, bear, and loon wood carvings. I tried to adapt, but the North Woods had become such a part of me and my work that I couldn't make it work in Florida. Again, I experienced major failure. And after watching all of the profit from the sale of my Maine business dwindle away, I decided that I'd better head back to Maine. I returned to Moosehead Country with $300 in my pocket, leased a building downtown, and opened another shop with a partner. This time, however, I decided to begin doing the things that I'd always been afraid to try. I bought a tenor sax and began playing music with a local singer, pianist, who was also female. We discussed doing an album together, and I decided to try to do a life-size statue of her to promote the album. It took 6 months of full-time work and $2,000 for the block of wood, but I did it. I had finally created the type of wood carving that I had always wanted to do. Then two things happened. The singer stopped playing music with me, and the statue got a full-page color picture in a national wood carving magazine. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I think I did both. By this time, I was running out of money again, and my business partner was disgusted with me for spending so much time on a project that didn't create any income for the shop. But I was so excited about having finally accomplished one of my major life goals that all I could think of was doing it again. So, in the reckless foolishness of middle age, my 40s, I decided to take the last of my money and do a statue of my 9-year-old daughter, Gretchen. It took 4 months. Two things resulted. First, my partner was so disgusted with me for living in the clouds that she bought me out. Second, the statue of my daughter ended up on the cover of the National Woodcarving magazine. After my partner took over the business, I did some more bouncing around and eventually bought a small place on a side street in Greenville. For the past few years, I've continued to pursue my music interests, and I constantly challenge myself with woodcarving projects that I think are too difficult for me. Life is never boring anymore. My daughter's statue resulted in the forming of a non-profit corporation that places artwork in hospitals free of charge. But that's another story and another film. The statue of the singer-pianist resulted in my most recent commission, a statue of a life-size woman. This commission was made possible because of another project I had completed a few years earlier. A couple came to me one day and expressed their desire to create a lodge in Moosehead country. They called it the Lodge at Moosehead. They were interested in having me carve them 5 beds and mirrors with various wildlife themes. I designed a bear bed, a loon bed, moose bed, fish bed, and a totem pole bed. Their lodge was successful and resulted in a flow of people coming to my shop to tell me which bed they were sleeping in. One such couple was so taken with the beds that they eventually managed to sleep in all 5 of them. At that point, they came to me and ordered one of their own. As they had a summer home on the coast of Maine, I created a bed with a coastal theme. The headboard had a lobster boat carved on it with a lighthouse on each post. The footboard had a lobster and lobster trap carved on it with puffins on each post. Upon completion of the bed, the customer commissioned me to carve the first life-size figure that I've ever sold. Finally, 5 years after I had carved my first figure, I had a paying customer. After some discussion with the client as to what he wanted, I went to work on creating a pattern. The client wanted long hair. As I was using my wife for the model and she had short hair, I ordered a wig. I had a gown custom made by a dressmaker. We decided to use a thick rope for a belt. Once we had all of the accessories that we needed, I went to work with the camera. After tracing front and side views from the photographs, I copied them onto a transparency and projected them to life size. Projected images are always somewhat distorted, so I had to do considerable measuring and correcting to develop an accurate pattern. The next step was to sculpt the upper body in clay. This step saves the live model a lot of time, as I can work directly from the clay. The block of wood is laminated basswood. 2x6 planks are glued together to create a solid block that won't crack or warp. After drawing the pattern onto the block of wood, I used a chainsaw to rough out the statue. Once I'd roughed it out as much as I felt comfortable with, I went to work with my chisels and gouges. This is the part of the process that I enjoy the most. There's something about slicing through wood with a sharp tool that I find very satisfying. One day, the customer came in to check on my progress. This is always a little unnerving because you never know how they'll respond. Fortunately, he seemed pleased with my progress. It's never very pleasant to see disappointment on a client's face. After briefly discussing his choice of colors for the dress and eyes, he left me to my work.
After we do the hard brush with loose, get all the loose hair that's out of there, we just soft brush.
One of the things that I love most about being a woodcarver in central Maine is the solitude, especially in the winter. Long, quiet days of working in my shop or my recording studio. After months of work, the carving has been completed and she's ready to paint. After applying a couple of coats of primer and painting the hair, dress, and belt, I acquired the services of a professional portrait painter to help me with the skin, eyes, and lips. Barbara Lane Tripp has years of experience painting and teaching. As I have little patience with classroom instruction, Barbara agreed to come to my shop and give me some on-the-job training. I've really enjoyed meeting with you this way, and I'm hoping that we can do this again soon, I hope. In closing, I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts, and then close with a song I wrote. The words will be on the screen as I don't try to sing them anymore. Here are the thoughts. Never fear failure. It's never final if you never quit. Never fear ridicule. Learn to laugh at yourself instead. Don't let obstacles stop you from achieving your goals. Solutions are out there. Find them. And finally, there are two types of dreamer. One wishes and then waits. The other sets goals and acts on them. Now, here's the song. I know I'm just a dreamer. This is a song that I've written for myself, and for those of you who have felt the sting of unkind words, closed minds, and old dreams that just haven't come true yet. I know I'm just a dreamer.